Welcome to Season 5 of the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we talk with enterprise and technology platform leaders about the people, processes, and platforms that make marketing and customer experience successful, scalable, and sustainable. This is what creates an Agile brand. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advisor and consultant for Fortune 1000 marketing and CX leaders and teams as principal and chief strategist at GK5A, and best-selling author, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and Agile certified coach. The Agile Brand podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To sign up for the Agile Brand newsletter and get the latest insights and articles on marketing technology and CX, or to purchase a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, go to gregkihlstrom.com. You can also find all my books on Amazon and other retailers. And now on to the show. Today we're going to talk about customer journey orchestration with a focus on SMS and messaging to help brands drive greater customer engagement and personalize the customer experience for consumers that quickly grow impatient by being saturated with impersonal messages from the brands they support. In fact, according to a recent report by Twilio, 2/3 of customers say they'll quit a brand if their experience isn't personalized. I've seen in my own work with leading brands that customer journey orchestration can help this. And to help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Trent Rossini, Managing Director at inQuba. Trent, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for the opportunity to spend some time with you. I have followed your podcast for quite some time, and clearly you're a leading authority in the space. So looking forward to the discussion.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, looking forward to talking about this topic with you as well. So why don't we get started by you giving a little background on yourself, and maybe for those less familiar with the product, can you explain a little bit about what inQuba does?
Yeah, my background really started in insurance and specifically health insurance. I was quite actively involved with a company called Vitality, and that company has an alternative view on how you deal with health insurance, and they specifically drive a wellness program, driving customers to engage with that program. Another key feature of the work that we did was it was very much orientated to offshore servicing. And the reason that's really relevant is at the time I was the chief operating officer running the operations, and we were servicing into the UK from an alternative market. And it was quite difficult to actually get a sense of what service was being delivered. And I think that it was a lot of the impetus to actually set up inQuba, to understand that to deliver a great experience, you really need a means to be able to listen and plug into an organization. And that after a number of years within that group, which really was an amazing experience, I thought it was time to move on and actually do something a little bit more innovative, a little bit more startup orientated, and that led us to set up inQuba. So we have, with inQuba, been quite active in the customer experience space, and I think like many vendors in the space, that's really where we started off. But I think we quickly realized that traditional CX is really limited, and it doesn't give you the whole picture. It fulfills the need in terms of giving you a sense of what customers are thinking and how they're feeling, but doesn't really show you the correlation with what they're doing. And that's really where customer journey orchestration comes into play. With organizations, you're trying to actively engage with your customer base, you're trying to deliver great service, you're trying to make sure that the customer can reach their goal. And what we do with customer journey orchestration is that we take traditional CX where you're just getting feedback, and we start to understand the behavior of the customer. And understanding behavior of the customer, we feel, is really a key differentiator. Start to understand whether, in fact, they're progressing along the journey, whether they're getting stuck on the journey, whether they're reaching their goals, or in some cases, and unfortunate cases, they're actually dropping off. So the whole principle of customer journey orchestration is to both understand what customers are doing, obviously across multiple channels, be that the call center, be that the web environment, that could be in instant messaging, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later, and then to overlay that with the perspective of the customer, how they're feeling, how they're perceiving value, and how that interplay between how they're feeling and what they're receiving in terms of engagements is driving them forward along the journey. So very exciting space. We are seeing amazing results. We're seeing much better results than we ever saw in CX. And I think one of the things that we maybe can talk about a little bit down the line is the importance of linking it to profitability. So very much focused on outcomes rather than simply focused on the emotion of the experience, which clearly is important, but the outcomes are really what businesses are looking for.
Yeah. Completely agree on all fronts. Definitely with the focus on outcomes and things like customer lifetime value and all that. And I also agree. I think it's a very exciting space right now. I've been working at it like yourself. Have been working at it for a while, but I feel like we're starting to make some progress as an industry here and get a little more of the mind share here. So which leads me to get started here and talking about customer journey orchestration. And although, as I mentioned, I think it's getting a lot more traction out there. For those that are a little less familiar with it, I want to provide a little bit of context. So, in your intro, you define it a little bit, but how would you define customer journey orchestration to those that are less familiar with it?
I think probably one of the better ways to describe it is actually centered around the methodology that we use. So we've got a 5-step process that we use, and it starts off with understanding the customer journey. And we do that by ingesting data from multiple sources. And we actually discover the journey, which is quite different and quite a departure from traditional journey mapping. So we're taking in data from a variety of systems, multiple channels, and what that allows us to do is to figure out what the timing and sequence is of interactions across an entire customer journey, or for that matter, multiple journeys. And the key difference with that is there are no assumptions. We're using real data flowing into the platform, and we're getting an in-depth view of what the real customer journey is. The second part of our methodology is then to actively engage with the customer, to start understanding how they're feeling on their customer journey. If they're stalling, if they're getting stuck, if they're not progressing, if they're indicating, for instance, in the acquisition journey that they're falling off, if for the reasons of servicing, they're not getting to actually meet their servicing objective, you want to understand a little bit of the why. And that's where we actually engage with the customers and we reach out to them using a variety of chat mechanisms across multiple channels to actually solicit that feedback. And that can be anything from transcription of voice into text, could be chat on a Facebook Messenger or Twitter channel, could be an interaction through a dialogue. So what happens then is that data is overlaid on the discovered journey, and that takes us on to step number 3 in our process, which is really to understand this whole relationship between what the customer has done and how they're feeling. And we've really borrowed a lot of the work that actually Schmidt from Forrester has done to understand the whole notion of value. And as Maxi says, value is not delivered. It's really a joint mechanism of participation from the customer and the brand. But the fact remains that if the customer is not receiving value, they're not progressing forward on the journey. All of our journeys are defined by a start point and a goal point. And what we do in step number 4 is we start to understand the inhibitors to progress. So what's preventing the customer from moving forward? Why are they not progressing? And what interventions can you put in place? And the last step, step number 5 of the methodology, then looks at the customer journey and it starts to optimize and put interventions in play. Now, those interventions can take many forms. In traditional CX, they're often centered around change management. They are focused on understanding what are the systemic changes necessary in the organization. There might be people changes, there might be training changes. Or what we're finding is that often nudges are very, very powerful. So the whole idea of sending just-in-time, highly personalized messages to the client to actually nudge them forward. And that whole combination has led to some incredible results where customers truly are getting a different kind of outcome than they would without customer journey orchestration.
Yeah. And so, for those listening then that, there's some things that have been done for, you mentioned journey mapping, or there is marketing automation that will, automatically trigger an email or a text or something in a
not quite as intelligent way, but it still does the trick, right? So what are some of the benefits of this customer journey orchestration approach that those previous methods weren't really able to address as effectively?
So I think often the best way to understand this is just think about a conversation between two individuals. To have a successful conversation between two individuals, you need one party to be speaking and the other party to be listening. And the party that's listening then needs to interpret what they're receiving and needs to act accordingly. So if we take that one step further and we think about a sales interaction, for argument's sake, there has to be very active listening, and then there has to be very active engagement. And time and sequence is really important. You have to know when to pause, when to progress, when to push harder, when to slow down. And journey orchestration is very similar in its nature. It considers factors such as time, it considers factors such as sequence, and it considers the interplay between what the customer is feeling and what we know about them to engage in a highly personalized way. In many respects, it's quite different to, for instance, customer journey mapping, which mostly, not always, but often is an assumption based on the organization's interpretation of the customer journey. And it's also contrasted to more traditional marketing automation, which is often characterized by a cascade of rules and the sending of communications that are unidirectional in nature. I think with customer journey orchestration, what we've seen is this whole ability to almost maintain state along the customer journey, understand context, and then have an objective, have a very clear objective of what you're driving towards. And that objective typically needs to be aligned between what the customer is trying to achieve. That might be, for argument's sake, taking out an insurance policy. It might be taking out a new mobile data plan. It might be buying a car. And once you've understood what the objective is, it's really your responsibility as an organization to move the customer forward. And customers move forward when the interaction with the customer is salient and relevant, and when they perceive value along the customer journey. So I guess if we have to summarize, it's a far more sophisticated solution for marketing. It brings together behavioral science, and it brings together all of the new developments in data. And we're also starting to do some really interesting work with generative AI, so that all of this information that we're collecting along the customer journey gives rise to even more personalized interactions with the customer, and makes the customer feel like they truly are interacting with a brand that gets them.
Yeah, that's great. And so, some of the what are some of the results that you've seen from your customers who have adopted this type of journey orchestration approach?
We've been recently doing some work with a health insurer, and really what they were looking to do is to get people to engage in their wellness program. So one of the things that they knew from an ROI point of view is that if the customer base, the policy base, engaged with the brand and actually started to use the benefits, that it fundamentally changed their retention rates. So with that in mind, we put together a whole series of interactions and engagements. This particular project was really centered around the WhatsApp channel, which has different levels of penetration in different markets. But for the markets where there is a strong presence, it's very powerful because of the fact that it is multimedia, because of the fact that it is low in cost, and it's highly personalized. And further, you actually get to verify the sender. So that particular project, the results were truly staggering. We had an 85% read rate. We had a 40% engagement rate. And just to be clear, that engagement rate means that of the messages that we sent out, 40% of those individuals interacted with some of the content and either went to a website or went through to the app or gave some level of feedback.
Wow.
And then most importantly, that particular project achieved a 17.5% sign-up rate for the benefit. The client is absolutely delighted. Another metric that we put together, the cost of running the program coupled with the communication costs, and the communication costs in this particular project were very high, was 3.6% of annual policy. So just to be clear, that's obviously policies where engagement did happen. So for the price of 3% of the annual policy, they had clients engaging in the benefits, and they know that their profitability and customer lifetime value will go up dramatically. So it really is a case study that the client is delighted with, and obviously one that we equally delighted with, because we are such strong advocates for this approach and methodology, and it's just so great to actually see it being realized in real life. I think one of the other key benefits of the project is the whole notion of nudging. So we keep track of how customers are progressing on the customer journey, and whenever they're stalling, we nudge them along, and we've seen that to be incredibly powerful.
I'd like to introduce you to a brand new podcast that I think you'll love. It's called The Innovation Economy, and on it, myself and my co-hosts Adam Chen and Bonnie Habian look at the factors that drive business growth, including how people, processes, platforms, and places work together to create the future of work. This includes talking with changemakers at large organizations that we call entrepreneurs, as well as how engaged employees can leverage their personal brand and superpowers to support their company, secure their own future, and create unprecedented value for the business, as well as with those working to create the innovative places where tomorrow's leaders will live and work. You can listen to the latest episodes on this platform or wherever you access your favorite podcasts by searching for The Innovation Economy. And you can go to www.innovationeconomy.show, that's innovationeconomy.show, to access the latest episodes, show notes, and more. Now let's get back to the show.
So for those listening, this all, this sounds great. And certainly the benefits and the lift you're able to get, the engagement rates, all of that sounds like a true benefit. What are some of the challenges in starting down this path? I mean, I just know from my own experience working with organizations, there are certain things that are easy, like it's easy to understand the potential benefits. It's easier to understand how it could benefit the customer, but then there's the challenge of getting it off the ground and stuff. So, what would you say is some are either one or some of the biggest challenges to organizations starting down this path with customer journey orchestration?
As it turns out, I think the history of IT projects is the biggest impediment we have. And unfortunately, typically when you're looking at digital engagement projects, you're looking at IT projects, the typical response is, this is going to take longer than I ever anticipated. It's going to be more difficult than I ever thought. And we're just not going to realize the benefits. So I think that's a default departure point for many of the clients that we interact with. Yeah. So I'd say the first key point is trying to convince clients that we actually can deliver something that actually has true benefits in a faster time frame that isn't actually technically as complex as many other projects. It's not quite as complex as doing a workflow or developing a website or doing an ERP system implementation. So I think the first point really is one of belief. The second point after that is just the change in the way you look at the customer journey. So often organizations are quite organized and centered around functions. They're trying to bring together, for instance, the marketing function with the IT function together with the process function. And they don't have a customer journey centric mentality. And we have to go through quite a lot of education to try and educate clients in the difference between process automation and managing the interaction with the client as opposed to the customer journey and the customer's lens on the world. So I think that's the second point, is just the mindset change in support of a project of this nature. The thing that we've seen is that it takes quite some time, because it's a new methodology, because it's a new approach, because it's a new technology. It takes a long time to convince organizations of the merits of this approach. And obviously, there's always going to be some level of skepticism. But we've seen time and time again, if organizations can just get going, if they can identify a narrow use case, and we're very big advocates of narrow use cases, not because that's the end point, but because it gives real life experience. And we've seen time and time again that if you can just get a client over the hurdle, have a little bit of faith to take a chance and try a new methodology, that you get the results, and then you get the momentum, and you start to build that across the business. So my biggest piece of advice to organizations that are operating in the space is spend your time to understand what you're trying to do, but don't try and boil the ocean. Choose a use case that will make a difference and get going. That's the most important thing, get going. And make sure that you've got, obviously, an organization, either a consulting organization or a vendor that's done this work before, that's going to be able to deliver results really quickly. These projects don't have to be big and complex. They're not large enterprise transformations. They are overlay projects, and they can produce amazing results in very quick time frames.
Yeah, I completely agree with that approach. I mean, I think the best way to get more buy-in is to show some quick wins and show the results of the effort and everything. So definitely agree there. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and focus on the SMS and messaging component of customer journey orchestration, which is certainly a very important part of this. So to give a little context here, WhatsApp, which you mentioned previously, it's the most popular messaging app with over 2 billion users. And it also serves customers well where SMS can be prohibitively expensive. So between those methods of SMS and other types of messaging, as well as other messaging apps, it's safe to say a brand can reach a significant number of consumers. So first, can you talk a little bit about, what does it look like when WhatsApp is integrated into journey orchestration?
So I think maybe just spend a little bit of time talking about the comparison between SMS and WhatsApp.
Yeah.
The truth is that WhatsApp, to be honest, is becoming a very expensive channel because of the fact that Meta has realized how powerful it is. So I'm not sure that you're going to necessarily benefit from cost savings. What you will benefit from is a far superior outcome. So SMS obviously is text-based. The sender is not known, so there's no way to actually verify who's sending you the particular message. It's not multimedia, and it's not very good at keeping track of state, and it doesn't feel like you're having a chat. The beautiful thing about something like WhatsApp, and it's partly applicable to MMS, which is basically a multimedia extension of SMS, is that, first of all, you've got a far richer set of conversations that you can have with people. You can start to structure your responses. You can introduce multimedia, video, personalized documents. You can share multimedia like audio files and images. And you also get to verify who the sender is. So the way we use WhatsApp specifically in customer journey orchestration is that we use it as a mechanism to nudge, having highly relevant and pertinent conversations at different points in the customer journey, and then using all of the context that we've collected against a particular individual to then personalize the interaction, making sure that the multimedia, the text, and the entire interaction is highly personalized, and also giving the opportunity through that particular channel to swap channels. Sometimes it's pertinent actually to get some feedback from a customer to say, look, the situation I find myself in is one where I can't resolve this issue. Can you get someone to call me? And you can then initiate that directly from the WhatsApp channel. It is a little bit market dependent. So some markets have higher penetration than others. But for the markets that have good penetration, and certainly, as you said, on a worldwide basis, the penetration is absolutely massive. It offers a far superior channel that really produces fundamentally different outcomes. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. It's not easy to use WhatsApp, just so far as the fact that Meta rightly manage the content very strictly. You can't just send any message. You need to actually have approvals for every single interaction. It needs to fit into their guidelines, which makes projects quite difficult, but it produces an amazing result because it means that you're not sending spam, the quality increases, and overall the experience for the end customer is so much better.
So, hurdles aside, as far as, approvals and staying within guidelines and everything, based on the results that you get from WhatsApp, does this mean SMS is less important now, or does it really just depend on the audience you're trying to reach?
I think it's a function of many things. I do think the audience is important, and even in the high penetration markets, there are still obviously always going to be people that aren't on the channel. We're seeing in the projects that we're doing that certainly there's a massive shift, and that there's a revenue shift and there's a channel shift. I think in many respects, SMS is an old technology. It's a very old technology, been around for a number of years. And just as we've moved on from plain text emails into HTML rich emails, I think that the same shift is going to happen. So it won't disappear in its entirety, but I do think that there's conclusive proof of the fact that the SMS usage is going to decrease, and then multimedia channels, not just WhatsApp, but whether it's Telegram or Line, or for that matter, Facebook Messenger, that those messaging channels are going to become a lot more prolific and used depending on the particular market you're part of.
Yeah, that makes sense. So where do you see the biggest potential down the road? There's already the ability to get great results using messaging with journey orchestration, but having your purview, where do you see the biggest potential for brands to really maximize this channel and this method?
I think in this day and age, you can't go into any business media, or for that matter, any media, without mentioning something about generative AI and AI generally. So I think that's a really big topic. The second big topic that I think is going to be highly relevant to the space is profitability management. Let me chat about both of those. Yeah. And starting off with the generative AI is, as we're collecting data, that data, fortunately, is well organized. And one of the prerequisites for really good AI is a well-managed data set. So we can feed that data set into the algorithms of the AI capabilities and use that in very intelligent ways to actually determine what is causing customers to drop off and not reach their goal, or for that matter, what combinations are leading to fantastic outcomes. And that means that there's less analysis. It also means that there's more automation. In many respects, it's a dangerous weapon that needs to be used very responsibly. The second element, and I think that's very relevant to my earlier comment around traditional customer experience management. Everyone talks about and aspires to have a situation of truly understanding the relationship between the investment in CX and the financial outcomes. And there has been a lot of skepticism and a fair amount of failure in the industry generally in terms of showing that link. The beautiful thing about doing customer journey orchestration and understanding customer paths is that you have a mechanism to actually cost those paths. When you start looking at goals, you have a mechanism to determine the revenue that's generated. And if you combine these two together, you land up in a space of truly understanding the relationship between the customer journey and customer profitability. And that is at an incredibly granular level. And it allows you then to do multiple kinds of analyses. It allows you to look at customer profitability. It allows you to look at product profitability. It allows you to look at journey profitability and engagement profitability. So I think this is the first time in this space where we start to bring together engagement, customer feedback, and couple that in a very tangible, in a complete or relatively accurate way to actually determine how the customer journey has an interplay with profitability. And it's a very exciting time to be in this space, because where I think in the past, whether it was consulting companies or vendors, they were dodging the CFO because they really were a little bit nervous that he might ask too many questions and that might lead to the termination of a project. I think what this is going to do is going to do exactly the opposite. We can, in fact, start with the CFO or start with the CEO and talk about the business benefits and work back from there. And we'll start to connect different parts of the business. And I think we're going to actually see a resurgence in this whole space as a result. And all of those skeptics that fundamentally didn't believe in CX, and I think there still are many in the market, will actually start to see the relevance and start to see a tangible reason why customer journey orchestration with customer experience management as a subset within that actually is so valuable to a business.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I was talking with another pretty large marketing technology vendor a few months back, and they were commenting to me about the number of conversations that they were having with CFOs early on in the process, as opposed to it being sort of a later on in the process. And so, it was one of those things where, when you mentioned that, it's interesting to see how CFOs are getting involved earlier, because this is not just an expenditure that we're talking about. It's actually something that is an investment in growing the business and growing revenue and recurring revenue and all of those kinds of things. So it's interesting you mentioned that as well. It seems to me to be a trend here and I think a good trend, because it's, I think everybody wins when these kinds of investments are made.
100%. We agree. And that's why we're so excited about this space. In some sense, maybe over-dramatizing it slightly, but it's almost like cracking the atom. I think we got to the nub of what's really important in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Trent, thanks so much for joining the show. One last question before we wrap up. I know you gave some great advice for organizations starting out, but I wonder if, to kind of double down on the wisdom in starting with some kind of, whether it's a pilot project or proof of concept or something, where should an organization look at, if they're planning something like that, what's a piece of advice that you would have for them as they're thinking about, dipping their toes in the water, so to speak?
What we generally find is, and it's allied to the comments that both yourself and myself made around the CFO, you want to home in on a space that's going to give you a very tangible ROI. Obviously, servicing, I think in the long term, probably will give you the highest level of ROI, delivering a great experience, getting to retain customers, making sure that you lower your costs. But those business cases are a little bit more difficult to actually prove in a short period of time. When you start looking at areas upfront in the customer lifecycle, specifically acquisition, onboarding, early engagement, the results you can get just allow you to get to that ROI model a lot quicker. So often what we're finding is that we're starting off in the early parts of the customer lifecycle, and then we sort of maturing into the other areas as we learn more and we get a little bit more of the belief. I think so much of what you have to do, if you the CX executive or the engagement executive or the chief customer officer in an organization, is that you've got to build up a belief. So you want to do that in a space that's the easiest to do that. We also, I think in many respects, accessing data in those early stages is often a little bit easier and not as vital and sometimes not as complex. So yeah, I'd probably recommend, start off in the front end of the customer lifecycle. And again, narrow the scope. Choose a couple of use cases. Choose ones that where you've got a pain point. Try to identify something that the organization has been speaking about as a pain point for some time, and then really focus on doing something quickly. The move to try and get perfection early on really isn't optimal. And obviously, just going back to your whole background, it's about being agile. It's about being agile, about finding an opportunity, making some progress, and then adjusting very quickly. So again, we very strongly align with this whole notion of identifying opportunities quickly, getting results quickly, and then refining and iterating through them.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Trent Rossini, Managing Director at inQuba, for joining the show. You can learn more about Trent and inQuba by following the links in the show notes.
Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.gregkihlstrom.com. That's GregKihlstrom.com. To get a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, visit my website, or you can find it on Amazon or other retailers. The Agile Brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay agile.